We're going. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Good Sound Club podcast. This week, we're going to go with some audiophile musing, and I'm mostly going to ask Sina his opinion, and I might share mine too, and we're just going to see how that goes. As always, I'm Tom.
Hi, Tom. I'm Sina.
All right, let's get to it. First question, timbre. What is timbre?
What is timbre? Well, let's look at the Webster definition. Well, it's not timbre. Quality of auditory sensations produced by the tone of a sound wave. Okay,
Wow.
it's actually a pretty good definition. Um, I mean, it's really all relative because um, when people talk about timbre, right, and they're talking about I mean, let's just say that they're talking about some sort of studio recording, a modern studio recording. Um, you have no idea what the instrument is. You know, if it's an amplified recording, you have no idea what an electric guitar sounds like after it's been through, a pedal chain of 10 different pedals and effects, and that's just before it gets into the actual box, into the microphone, and then the recording engineer has its way with it. So it's all relative. So what does it mean when someone says something has good timbre? I don't really know. It's just kind of just saying like something is good or something is bad. It doesn't really mean that much. Um, and then people want to compare reproduce sound to live sound and say this doesn't have a live or a real timbre. It's like, okay, well, I mean, I think I know what you're talking about, but I don't really. I can't.
Yeah.
Because again, what type of music, what aesthetic of music, it falls under. If you want to talk about different types of sound perception, right? Intellectual or cerebral perception versus what's more kind of sensual, touchy feeling, if that makes sense. Timbre
Hmm.
is definitely in the latter, and so it's kind of on the plane of feeling and the plane of emotion. And so, some people, for instance, hate planar magnetic speakers and headphones for that matter, and they think that they have very off timbre. They think that they're just not realistic sounding with certain instruments, and other people they love it. They think that's the only way to go, and that's like the definite realism of it. So that just goes to show how relative it is, really.
It's
Um,
almost textual. It's almost like
Textural.
yeah, like microdynamics. I know, I know, it's kind of like verbal, you know, garbage. Really, what we're saying right now, but
Yeah.
it's what is the importance of it? Like, how do you know a recording sounds real, or how do you know it's your transducer? I don't know if you can.
You can't. Yeah, there's no such thing as real. There's only sensory pleasures that we each get as individuals. And I don't really believe that we necessarily hear differently. I think that our ear brain systems have evolved over millennia to kind of all operate more or less the same way. It's just that our individual responses to certain sensory inputs, auditory sensory inputs, kind of what touches the auditory G spot, if you will, funny bone,
Mhm.
whatever. Um, that is what varies from individual to individual. So, how important is it? I don't know. Let me give you an example. I've heard all-tech horn systems, metal horns with compression drivers mounted to them, and a woofer and a front-loaded horn, so like a two-way speaker like that. And the timbre is pretty awful. As you would imagine, an aluminum diaphragm in a compression chamber firing into a metal horn, it's not going to really reproduce what a woodwind instrument sounds like in reality. You would just think about it from a material point of view. But does that really matter? Maybe it depends. Do you really like the auditory, or sorry, sensory stimulation of like immediacy and attack and having kind of that in the room sensation that sound is being projected towards you? Well, if so, then that's a compromise that you're definitely going to take. having that metal horn and that compression driver mounted to it over, wanting it to necessarily sound correct with all sorts of different acoustic instruments. So it's just one part of the puzzle, I guess, and it all depends on what stimulation is most important to you.
I'd make that compromise.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think I would too, a lot
yeah,
of the time.
yeah. I mean, if I had the room for it, and I'm just concerned that it is room filling, and not maybe not everyone in the room would enjoy that.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
and having your cake and eating it too, having good tone and you know accurate quote unquote texture, and also attack and such can be achieved, but balancing those compromises is what's really hard. It's what people spend all their time and money chasing. So
I think what really makes it complicated is I don't think you can just have timbre. I don't think you can put that on a graph. I think it's fully subjective from
yeah,
all your experiences, like in person. Well, of course, everything's in person, but I mean, live music versus something recorded listening to at home. I think
yeah,
you could.
and
I like
again,
to say timbre. Hold on, one sec. To say timbre is a lot of the time really closely related to the frequency response, and some I would say, like some Flencher Munson curve, where if something sounds too low, you might think it sounds off to the
yeah,
real
I get
world.
what you're saying, but in my opinion, it's not really related to frequency response at all. At least not with the frequency response that we consider when we look at a graph. Um, I think that the different, uh, what people commonly refer to as tonal colorations, but a lot of the times that's used in place of saying timbre or whatever. When people refer to those, what causes that in the sound is really the sound of different materials. So it's kind of easy in the example of the Altec horns I gave to imagine that, like an actual acoustic reproducer, it's made of certain materials. How is that going to compare to, an actual wood instrument or the very fleshy vocal cords that we used to sing? But it goes beyond just acoustic materials. Even electronic components, the materials that comprise of the wire that's used to hook it all up, the capacitors, the resistors, all of that, they all have, in my experience, their own sound character or sound color, whatever you want to call them. And if you're trying to make an amplifier or any audio sound reproducing component, balancing the material colorations together to make something that is ultimately, pleasing to the ear, it works well in a whole unit. That's really difficult, and that's kind of why so many different commercial products exist. There's no perfect amplifier. It's because it's kind of like asking what's the perfect meal. There's no such thing.
Yeah, yeah, totally get it. But it has me wondering, like, why is it modern equipment often goes for kind of a I don't know, like a I don't want to say thought out, but a data driven
Technocratic
signature.
is the word that you're looking for. So
Why
you mean
is
like a mode of thinking that's dominated by technical achievement or specifications, right?
or mass appeal, or trying to sound impressive. I like
Sure.
saying the word impressive because
Okay.
it might not be impressive to everyone,
Okay.
but what do you think about that in the timbre
Okay.
of the sound?
So yeah, to answer a question like that, I would go back in time. I'd go back in time to see when it first started. You know me, so but I'll tell the listeners something I take really great interest in whenever I'm trying to deduce something in audio is I go back in time. And so I've studied a lot about just modes of thought that people have had since the beginning of the 20th century up until now. By people, I mean both consumers and manufacturers of sound reproduction equipment. And so, um, in the period of 1930s, when audio was having its boom in the U.S., well, really worldwide, but mainly centered in the U.S. Because of motion pictures and the sound accompaniment to them, right? That's where all of the money, almost all of the money, came from for research and development in audio. Of course, radio had already been around for a little bit, but it wasn't quite as lucrative as motion pictures were as far as entertainment goes. So when that money was coming in, you had these brilliant minds, these engineers that worked for these massive firms, like really monopolies. Imagine how large Microsoft or Apple is today. They weren't quite that large, but in a relative sense, back then they were huge. Bell Laboratories, and companies like that. So you had these brilliant minds from all over the world, MIT, Harvard graduates, whatever, going to work for these companies. And these people were engineers, yes, first and foremost, but secondly, and this is the part that's really nebulous or difficult to describe. They were not dominated by what I like to call engineering thought or technocratic thinking, right? It wasn't all about the specifications. They were very important, and because of the funding that was available to them for research and development, they were able to push the boundaries all the time of what it meant to have low distortion, what it meant to have a high output amplifier. These were new technologies at the time that we take for granted today, but that's what they were chasing, right? And when does the question of good enough come into play? The answer is there's no real answer, because if you really think about it, we haven't really come that far since the 1930s in design of any audio component, acoustics, amplification, whatever. Yeah, there's brand new technologies like digital, but that's besides the point. Um, where was I going with this? Why do moderns chase it that much more? It's a combination of factors. One is marketing. So 1930s development and research was all in the private sector, more or less. Consumers had radios in their home. They didn't have hi-fi systems. They had gramophones, but no one was really concerned about the fidelity of those. Not that much, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the 40s, after the war, America, of course, had a post-war boom thanks to industrialization. Any country that wins a war that they didn't really take home losses in is going to have an industrial boom. So you have all these people coming back from the military service, getting free education from the government, subsidized in electronics and engineering. A lot of them go off to work in radio and television and those types of fields, and then a lot of them also retire. And now you have this actual home industry of people who are interested in high fidelity sound reproduction in the home. A lot of them are retired engineers and stuff like that. So at this point, marketing comes into play, because if you're advertising to an engineer, and if you look at if you look at these old audio catalogs from the 50s, you just go to the section about amplifiers. Christ, there was like 10 amplifiers that all look the same, made by all these different little names that you've never heard of in the US. Every block in New York or Chicago probably had someone in a shop making high fidelity amplifiers and stuff like that. So how do you like differentiate between these? Well, specifications became a really valid form of market differentiation. If you look back at the old Macintosh ads, and I've shown you some of them, right? One of the things they highlight are the distortion numbers, incredibly low, lowest in the industry, they say sometimes. And that's really appealing if you're an engineer and you're kind of on that line of thinking, or even if you're not. You're looking at that and saying, "Yeah, that's what I want. I don't want distortion in my in my home. I want high fidelity." So that's probably one of the biggest draws is the marketing aspect of it. Um, the other aspect of it, I might lose people here in terms of just some people might have been nodding along to what I was just saying, but I might lose some of them here. There's probably just been an overall decline in, uh, let's say, the spirituality of people, I guess, or their sensitivity to music over the years, over the decades. And I mean, I'm going to sound like a cranky boomer here, but it's like that's kind of shown in all aspects of society. If you look at the types of music that's popular today compared to the 50s, compared to the prior years, and that shows itself in audio products too. The miniaturization of everything,
Mm.
the need to have everything be as convenient as possible, as small as possible. All of these things lend themselves to technocratic thinking. It's no longer about having the best. It's about making something
Do it
that's
all.
going to sell, basically.
Mm. Yeah, that does make sense. I've been thinking about getting that Apple HomePod, the little one, because it just kind of does it all. I might uh I might get it later on. I might talk about its sound, but where does the tone come in? Where does the tone come in for that equipment? It was Did we lose it all in the digital age? You
No,
know.
I don't think so. Well, I don't think so. Um, well, where does tone come in? Well, first I'll say for me, tone is king. You have to have tone, and I differentiate tone from timbre, but that's a separate discussion. Um, did we lose it in the digital age? Well, no, because that would almost imply something I don't want to imply, which is that digital has poor tone. It doesn't actually. Um, you know what? People like to make fun of that Sony slogan from when the compact disc was new, "A perfect sound forever," right? Um, they weren't exactly wrong. As far as an
Hmm.
advertising slogan goes, they were pretty on the money. Like digital technology is really, I won't cuss, effing amazing. The
Yeah.
problem is with its mass market execution. That's where things fall short, and that's why so many people these days, in our hobby at least, have a sour taste in their mouth when they hear the word digital. It's for no good reason other than that's just what they've been exposed to because that's what the market has.
Yeah.
Um,
I hear that, but I
yeah,
don't feel a lot of my colleagues or cohorts despise digital. I think they love digital.
a lot of people do. Um, I mean, it's really it's kind of a weird thing. Like I see some guys that are die hard on some side of the fence, and we had one on our show a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
then I
Parker
see other
loves.
guys who have they have really good turntable systems, like high end turntable systems, and their primary listening thing is vinyl, and they're usually older gentlemen, and they want to get into digital, so they're like, okay, I don't know anything about this. I'm computer blind. What do I buy? So they go to Google, starter digital system, they type it in, and then search engine. What it brings up is a Chinese made DAC with a Sabre chip in it, two op amps. The op amps have nested composite feedback, so there's like about 130 decibels of feedback, and then there's a switching mode power supply, and it's $100, and it's the top rated thing on Amazon. It's the top rated thing for all the YouTube reviewers, and it's the top rated thing on certain sites that concern themselves with audio science. And so,
Does
of
it?
course, that's what you buy. Like, what else is there to
Yeah.
buy?
Does that do AirPlay and Spotify too?
It might. I don't know. I'm not really. That's not really what I'm talking about, but it might.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then what I find interesting is this person that I just described who goes online and buys this thing when they're coming from this analog background. Half of them seem to actually love it, and they say, "Yeah, it's not as good as my analog system, but I love the convenience of it." And then the other half, and this is where I fall, are like, "This is dog shit. I don't want to listen to
Mm.
this. Like, how can you listen to this? This is so, whatever words they want to use, digital sounding. It's so fatiguing and so washed out. And I'm not really sure where that distinction comes in. Um, but it really surprises me because it's that exact type of person that I see have those two opposite reactions. Um,
I
yeah,
like I like to think that it's really difficult to unhear something. Like once you hear something that completely wows you,
right.
it's really difficult to go back. And for me, digital I wouldn't say digital wows me, but it's really difficult to go back from a convenience standpoint away from digital.
Yeah. And on the flip side, it's really difficult to retain that convenience and also make it sound beautiful. That's really challenging, and that's something that I'm like currently focusing a lot of my independent energy on is how to do that because as you know, I love YouTube. I love streaming music,
Mhm.
but I don't want it to sound as good as the most inconvenient system I have. I have plenty of inconvenient systems, but it has to like pass a threshold for me, and it does do that. I have that already, but I'm just wondering how I can constantly get that same threshold of sound quality with more and more convenience. That's what I'm starting to really kind of zero in on. And there's no easy answer. There's very little useful information online about that.
So what are some takeaways about what we spoke about? Timbre, engineering, digital audio.
Takeaways? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Everyone
I
has
was
to
kind
have
of
their
just
own takeaway. What do you mean?
wrapping it up. I mean,
I think it
I love
wraps itself up. I don't know.
I love digital. Um,
Digital can have good tone. It can.
yeah,
It doesn't have to be expensive either. You just have to be a little bit careful.
I like to think I fall in the camp where I don't mind digital sound reproduction, but I think the front end matters a lot more to me in my point in life.
Front end, you mean the stuff that comes downstream. That's what you mean, right?
Uh, the speakers, the amplifier, I think
Right.
that's a much higher priority for me because usually when I borrow something, I usually it's a front end component, not
Yeah.
yeah. Like right
Yeah,
now,
no, for sure. Like I think it was last night or a couple nights ago. I was just I just bought this new amplifier. You know about it, but it's this really I got a bargain on this really nice Philips amplifier from the late 50s. It's a tube amplifier. And I just wanted to hook it up to test it quickly. So I have this kind of little test rig that I put together. What it is, it's a Helm Bolt USB DAC amp. It's like $100 like dongle that you can plug into your phone or your laptop. And then I have an AudioQuest 3.5 mil to RCA adapter, and then just a pair of RCA cables out of that. So that's basically like a walking digital system that I can plug my phone into and just stream whatever I want. And so I plugged it in just to see if the amplifier was working because it's a 7-year-old piece. I had no idea if it was working or not. In fact, the guy who sold it to me said one channel was dead. And if I was a little bit more diligent, I would have like brought it up on a Variac and all that. But usually I just get too excited and I can't be bothered. I just plug it in and see if it works or not. And my point being is that I had this, $100, $130 if you want to count the AudioQuest adapter, digital setup with my phone, not counting the price of the phone. And I sat there for like 2 hours listening to this amp, and I was just like, wow, this is fucking awesome. I was listening to it for 2 hours. I ran through all of the music that I've been listening to recently, and I just loved it. And the amp worked, thankfully, it worked perfectly.
yeah, it looks
Um,
cool.
yeah, and I was just wondering, like, why do I kill myself to, have all of these boxes and USB converters and this huge DAC that has tubes in it and stuff like that when I get this satisfied from this low of a cost barrier? There's no good answer. The answer is that I'm sick, but that's a different story.
I've seen worse patients. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm on the road to recovery.
That's good. That's good. Recovering audiophile.
Something like that.
Yeah. So what what'd you think about it? The amplifier.
Oh, the amplifier. You want to talk about the amplifier?
Yeah.
Um,
Let's talk about it. I mean,
I don't know if I'm ready to talk about that because
you're not ready.
I'm going to drive the prices up. It's not that expensive.
Yeah, we do have a big audience.
All right, it's a Philips integrated amplifier. I said late 50s, but it might be early 60s. I'm not sure the exact year, but it's right from the early period of stereo because it still has a mono switch on it. Um, it's the Philips AG 9016. And I actually don't mind talking about it because it's a 2-watt amplifier. It's a 2-watt single-ended amplifier, so it's not really going to service like
My
probably
Magnapans.
95%. Sorry?
My
Yeah, not
pals.
your Magnapans. No, not
Yeah.
your dad's Magnapans. But I hooked it up to some basically some open baffle speakers with 4 ohm German drivers. So kind of what this amp was designed to drive. It was made in Holland. It has really impressive build quality. It's an EL95 amp. EL95 is pretty similar to an EL84, but a little bit different. Um, and yeah, it's probably up there with the best amplifiers I've ever heard, just in terms of kind of its ability to uh, convey subtle intonations in music and just be interesting to listen to. It catches the ear, basically. Um, and I got it for 150 bucks
That's a good
Canadian, which
deal.
is like, yeah, basically free. And I almost left it there because when I went to the guy, I wasn't even buying that. I was buying something else, and I just saw it on the shelf, and I immediately knew what it was. And this is what helps, basically being such a huge vintage audio nerd, is that I start to see things in people's homes, and I just know what it is. And
Mhm.
this guy was in a position where He's a very nice gentleman. I'm very grateful for him, but his wife was really becoming unhappy with the amount of shit that he had hoarded. He had like these ginormous Altec 604s, well, the Ure version of the Altec 604. The cabinets, each cabinet was about the size of a fridge, and it was just sitting in his small Canadian domestic living room. And his wife was just sitting there with her arms folded the whole time I was there, like not happy. And when I saw this piece on his shelf, I'm like, "Do you need that? You want to sell it?" He's like, "How much?" I'm like, 150. He's like, "Sure." So I took it. He told me one channel's not working. I just, worst case scenario, the output transformer's dead, and I just wasted 150 bucks. Best case scenario, tube's dead, and I just replaced the tube. Turned out to be an even better case scenario. Nothing was wrong with it. I don't know why he said one channel wasn't working, and I love the sound.
Nice. That's good. That's good. Did you get to hear his big system or no?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Did you get to hear his big system or
No.
just passing by?
Um, he wasn't. He was kind of like you in that he cares a lot more about front end gear. So he had a lot of amps,
Mm-hmm.
and of course he had those crazy speakers. That was just one of his systems. Apparently he had two more, but his sources were all like super cheap stuff, like cheap CD players, cheap old turntables, nothing really fancy. And so that kind of let things down a little bit, I think, because when you have gear of that level,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you want to start feeding it. But yeah, no, I didn't ask to hear it. I was kind of in a hurry to get home with my loot.
Nice, nice. Yeah, had to hear that amp on the way home.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go on to the next topic. What are some pitfalls in audio?
Oh God, pitfalls in audio.
Yeah.
There's about 50 million of them. I don't know where to start.
Let's
Um,
uh let's do it from the perspective of someone trying to get into digital audio.
okay, that's a good place to start. What are the pitfalls? Okay, it's really tough. If you're trying to get into digital audio and you don't know anything, I mean, let's talk about the converter first, because actually, what comes before the converter is 10 times more complicated and convoluted. Because then you're not only talking about sound quality, but also all sorts of usability and lifestyle problems, right? So let's just talk about the converter. In the past 5 years or so, I would say, the marketplace has become absolutely flooded with cookie cutter DACs that have absolutely no difference from one another. They're all pretty much the same thing. They all take the latest ESS or AKM chip off the shelf. They take a couple of op amps for the output stage and the IV. They take a switch mode power supply or just like a really basic, cheap linear power supply. They take off the shelf, again, digital input boards for the SPDIF receiver and the USB input. And if the product's coming from China, usually a lot of those things are actually fake in terms of the components used, the capacitors used. Sometimes the actual USB chips used are fake. And they throw it into a little box. Boxes all look the same too. They all have the same switches, the same inputs, the same outputs. They all have pretty similar sounding names, and they all sell for the same money. And every couple of months, or every couple of weeks, actually, now the rate has accelerated. They release a new one, and there's no difference between the new one and the old one. It's just they change the name a little bit, they change the box a little bit. It's time to buy something new, and it gives them this kind of marketing engine that they've created through the forums, through YouTube, through whatever, an excuse to basically talk about a new product when there was nothing to talk about last month because this was already the best thing you could buy. So if you're just someone who's starting out and you just start Googling this stuff, because that's what people do these days, they really, really rely heavily on the internet to influence their purchasing decisions. That's what you're met with is this sea of faceless, nameless products. And unfortunately, in my opinion, that's exactly what they give you is faceless, nameless sound. Um, I would stick with kind of stuff that's not kind of, I mean, everything is made in China, really, when you're talking about the low end of DAX, but some of it at least has some more legitimate, let's say, US representation. So the DAC amp I mentioned earlier, the Helm Bolt, really highly reviewed by uh, many. popular websites, Twittering Machines. Darko reviewed it. I'm not sure if it's had a stereophile review or whatever, but a million reviews out there, and I really like it myself. Helm is a British company. The dongle, of course, is made in um, China, but it sounds really good. It sounds really good, and works from a phone. It comes with a little USB-A adapter so that you can plug it into your laptop. Is it perfect? No, but it is pretty much as good as the more expensive dongles in about the $200 to $250 range, and it's cheaper than all of them. So that's one that I really like. So in terms of a pitfall, there, it's just kind of information overload and not
Mm-hmm.
really knowing where to start. Start with something that I think has um, some sort of representation in the West and is not just kind of this proxy marketing campaign on the face of a, let's say, Eastern product that is the latest in a long line of products that are identical to it. Um, I don't really know where Helm came from. I never heard of them before this product. I don't know if they're a new company or what, or they were making headphones before or something, but this is a really good DAC. So yeah, just try to avoid kind of hype trains and marketing campaigns because they're everywhere,
There's
especially
a
with DAX
lot of
these
hype
days.
trains.
Yeah,
They get contagious too, and everyone's like, "Oh man, I bought it. I can't wait." Everyone's like, "Oh, can't wait to get mine."
yeah,
Someone gets it and is like, "It's awesome," and everyone's like, "It's gonna be awesome," and then there's even more comments, and you go, "Whoa, man, this
it's
is."
self perpetuating. Yeah, that's why it's a train.
And then you get it, and you go, "This is okay."
This is all right.
Yeah, and then you're like, "Maybe I'm hearing something wrong," but
You're right. Maybe I'm the problem. Exactly.
where do you upgrade from a dongle deck? Like, let's say the Dragonfly, the Helm bolts. Where?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't have the answer
Sure.
because, like I said, the 5 years ago was really different. I feel like things kind of changed overnight, but nowadays there is no real upgrade. Like when you look at the $100 stuff and then you look at the $500 stuff, and oftentimes from the same company, right? Because they'll have products in both those brackets. There's really no fucking difference whatsoever. It's the same
Mhm.
chip, which don't get me wrong, like the chip doesn't actually mean anything. The chip does not make sound by itself. The chip is there to do number crunching, and sometimes it also generates a voltage. But a lot of the times they're also their current output, and something else is in the circuit is responsible for generating the voltage. But it's the same chip. Still op amps on the output. So, I mean, maybe you get slightly better op amps. Who knows? It still sounds like an op amp, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, maybe now instead of a switch mode power supply, you get a linear one, but it's cheap. It's like a little $10, one of those blue potted toroidals, and then, a couple of caps, which hopefully by now, if you're paying $500, aren't fake Chinese knockoffs,
Mhm.
like Chemicon or whatever. Um, Maybe now you're getting a real XMOS or Amonera USB chip, and then usually what you get for price differentiation at the $500 mark nowadays is XLR outputs, which is
Oh,
like whoop de doo. Like who gives a fuck? What does that do for you? It doesn't do anything in terms of actual sound. So I don't really have the answer. I mean, yeah, it's like this actually segues into talking about another pitfall, which is like flying too close to the sun. If you have something you're really happy with, like this helm
yep.
bolt or like a dragonfly, and you're like, man, this is awesome. I love listening to tunes on this. It only cost me so much money. I could afford it quite easily. It's really convenient. Okay, now I want more. What's next? So then you start searching, and a lot of the times, if you didn't know what you were looking for when you got that first product, you're definitely not going to know what you're looking for when you're looking for an upgrade, other than you want an upgrade. And there's so many cases of people like buying new things and they don't even compare it to the old thing properly because they've already made it up in their minds the new thing is going to be better. So they'll just sell the old thing as soon as they get the new thing, or they'll do a brief comparison, but whatever, their expectations are weighing in so heavily that they've already convinced themselves that the new thing must be better. And then time goes on, and now okay, maybe it is like a little bit better, sure, for $500 you'd hope it to be, but time goes on, and now all of a sudden this person no longer thinks of themselves as being in the market for $100 DAX. I'm a $500 DAC boy. Where do I go from $500 DAX? I'm a big boy now. I'm going to start looking at $2,000 DAX or $1,000 DAX.
All right, now we're
And
talking.
now we're talking, and now it's just a self-perpetuating thing because you never really learned anything from that first jump. You know, what are you going to make your next purchase based off of? There's just going to be more marketing, more hype trains. Best case scenario, you do some googling and you found someone who compared the $2,000 DAC that you want to buy to the $500 one you have right now, and they said it's way better, blows it out of the water. Cool.
Nice.
Where's my credit card number? Let me type it in right now. Oh, I can buy it on Amazon? Even better. One click, instant checkout, So where do you upgrade? I mean, I don't really have recommendations. And that's kind of because I'm really out of touch with what's in the marketplace now for under $1,000.
Yeah.
I kind of just tend to go for what's cheap and sounds good and not really care about the other stuff. I don't want to use the term diminishing returns because that's so cliche. Like I hate that term, but I'm just not up to speed. I'm sure there are some good products out there. Maybe iFi makes some, maybe Shed Audio makes some. Well, I'm sure
Mhm.
they do. I know they do, but I just don't really keep up to date with them. So I don't have actual practical recommendations to give people, other than to avoid making the mistake of jumping into something you don't need to. If you're happy with what you have, either study really hard when you're looking for an upgrade to understand what you're actually buying, or don't do it at all. Because if you just try to get it off of somebody else's recommendation, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be disappointed, you know? So
It's really difficult to recommend anything to anyone
it's
because
really hard. Well, it's really hard to do so genuinely. It's difficult to
Mhm.
do so genuinely. To do it as like a shill, it's really fucking easy. These people do it all the time. But you and I know that.
I would love to do that. If any manufacturers are listening, please
Yeah,
send
I
me
don't. So
product.
don't contact Tom, not me.
Yeah, I would love. Well, I don't need a DAX, so don't no DAX, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I mean that's why I prefer the front end. I mean, how good is good enough, and I've heard better. I've heard way better, and I go $8,000 for this.
Well, it's a cooler market. There is at least more product differentiation there. There really is not very
Right.
much in the DAC scene right now, in terms of mainstream consumer products that you can just buy. They're all very similar.
That brings me to something I've always thought about: is how much does mainstream matter really in the DAC market? Like, let's say you're in $100 DAC market. Is that really mainstream? I don't know. Most people have a Bluetooth speaker, HomePod, uh, you know, an Alexa or something. But what is mainstream? Like, is there a mainstream
What is
DAC market?
mainstream? It's just that people have heard of it. If you can find a review
Mm,
of it on YouTube, it's mainstream. It's
not
kind
not a
of,
not a boutique item.
yeah, not a boutique item, not something from a smaller name. There are plenty of smaller names out there, I guess, making stuff these days in the personal audio sphere and DAX. Like I just found this company today, Earman. I
Oh
showed
yeah,
you. I'd never heard of them
it's
before until I
it's a
saw them on the
subsidiary.
Darko video. But they're making cool stuff. Like it looks okay.
Yeah,
Um,
Earman, I believe, is a subsidiary of the Aries company, the tube amp.
oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I knew they were European. There was some European connection, but I didn't know that. That's interesting.
yeah, I believe they have a desktop tube amplifier, input output tubes with one of their DACs built in.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think that's their deal. No, those products look nice. Yeah, I'm sure they're good. Nice
Yeah,
little market they're trying to corner there. I think.
yeah.
I mean, there's not a
It's
lot of
it's
competitors
refreshing.
there,
There's a
but
lot of competitors, but it's refreshing to see someone do something different, even if it's a little different, or even if it's going
mm,
back to where the state of the market was in like 2008. It's like, okay, well, at least not everything has to be balanced for no reason. You know,
mm-hmm.
that was really refreshing when I saw they were making like a single-ended portable DAC amp for $250. It's like, okay, great, we're back to 2008 finally.
Yeah, that's like the SMSL, top being shit, Hi-Fi,
Yeah, all of it has to have
sub
XLR all
thousand,
the time.
sub $1,000. Well, obviously people want XLR because They have like this.
It's a bigger connector, dude.
It's a
It's a
bigger.
lot
It's
bigger.
not.
Have you
It's
ever
not just
measured?
bigger connector, but they perceive it to be less hassles.
No, it doesn't have anything to do with hassles. What are you talking about? They
Like
want the
ground.
bigger connector. You're not a big boy
Yeah.
unless you're plugging in XLRs, okay?
Yeah. I wouldn't know. I've been single-ended this whole time. A lot of people much further in my journey are also almost all single-ended.
Yeah, there's
But
a reason for it.
but
You want to know why?
tryouts? What's the reason?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with tryouts. It has to do with the fact that differential signaling has absolutely no benefit in domestic audio applications. Like zero. That's why.
Yeah.
It's actually as simple as that. And so if you can make a simpler product, simpler circuit, which by default being unbalanced is simpler, um, and not lose out on anything, why wouldn't you?
I mean, that sounds like it would just be better. It would be cheaper because there'd be less parts.
Yes.
Hmm.
Well, that's the thing. Well, that's the thing about a lot of these products too, is that they're not even actually fully differential. They
Oh,
just the XLR connectors are just for show.
yeah.
You know.
You just use a phase splitter and
Yep.
yeah. But well, that's the state of audio. That goes into the marketing. Do you really need it? Probably not. Is it more enjoyable? But
Definitely not.
yeah, that's why I stick to the front end. That's I'll be there for a while. I think.
What else you got for us in terms of topics? You want to continue on pitfalls?
Yeah, let's keep going with the pitfalls. What's
We go all day with the pitfalls.
Yeah, that was just about a dongle, man. Man,
Yeah, my first speaker system was a pair of Sony speakers, um, SSG3s from the 70s, and they were cool because in the 70s everyone had ceramic magnets already, but the woofer on those was Alnico. I don't know why Sony did that for that particular line of speakers, but they did. And then I bought the speakers first. It was Canada Day, excuse me, of 2019, I think, or 2018. And then I realized, okay, well, now I need an amplifier for them. So I just quickly went back to classifieds, and I only had like I didn't have much money left, so I just looked for the cheapest receiver I could find. It happened to be an Akai 1140, and actually, it's an excellent budget receiver. I found out later. I didn't know anything about it when I bought it. I didn't know anything about any stereo equipment when I bought it, but that was a really good buy, 150 bucks. Speakers were 300, so now I was up to 450. And then CD player, I already had one. I had an Arkham CD73, which is a really good CD player, really good budget CD player. And I hooked up that system, and that was probably the most fun I ever had in my whole life listening to music. That was, I don't remember if it was 2018 or 2019, but I would have been like, I don't know, 22 or something. And it was all downhill from there. From that moment on, it was just downhill.
mm-hmm.
Um, because I was having so much fun. I was like, this gear is so cheap. It's only going to get better. How can it get worse? Um, one facet of the system I didn't mention. I was using. I didn't have speaker stands, so I didn't want the speakers to just be on the floor, like pointing at my knees. So I used old college textbooks that I bought and never read to angle them up so that the soundstage like floated above the speakers. And that system was so good. I was listening to David Bowie and like getting goosebumps and stuff from uh, Arkham CD player. Where am I going with the story? Since then, I've met so many people, usually boomers, but not always. And I say boomer, I don't say that in a derogatory way. I hope everyone who's listening realizes that it's an endearing term. Usually older people who they have very similar sentiments. Maybe in their youth they had a Marantz receiver, or they had a Dynaco SD70 or something with some Advent or KLH speakers. If you were on the East Coast, that's what you would have, or if you're on the West Coast, maybe you had some JBLs, and that's what they had in their college dorm. And they said that that's the best sound I ever had in my life. And these are guys with like tens of thousands of dollars into their current stereo systems, and all the fun is gone. And it just makes you wonder why. It's because in the pursuit of better, if you don't educate yourself, if you get caught up with pretenses that you would have never had when you put together that first system, because you couldn't, because you didn't know anything, you didn't have any of these biases that you've made for yourself, these dogmas that you follow. uh, if you don't avoid those things, and they're very difficult things to avoid accumulating, um, you will lose your way. And it doesn't matter how much money you spend. It really doesn't. It's completely irrelevant. Of course, you have to spend some money in order to get some experience, but I see guys who never learn their lesson. They just buy and sell the same thing. Literally, sometimes the same component. They buy it and sell it again. It didn't work the first time, and they think maybe a third time's the
Yeah,
charm.
maybe I heard it wrong.
Maybe you heard it wrong. Maybe it was a synergy thing. No, dude, it just sucks. You just gotta suck it up. It sucks.
Yeah,
Sometimes they buy the same thing, but it has a different shine or
it's
coat paint
this
on it.
is the version 2.
This is the version 2, or you know, fuck, what do I say? All these
This is the X
Chinese,
version.
yeah, all these Chinese tube amplifiers that have become, again, really popular, like the DAX, and we know why. Um, they're all pretty much the same thing. Some of them are slightly better than others. Well, I should say some of them are really better than others, because some of them are really just fly by night operation scams, and some of
Oh
them are
yeah,
actually
you
kind of
show me some
legitimate.
photos.
Yeah, but if you buy one of those and it sucks, it's like, okay, well, did you learn your lesson? No,
No, tube
I bought
sucks.
another one. The tube sucked. Yeah, it must be the tube, dude.
I gotta upgrade these bad boys.
KT88s are not my thing. You know what I need? I need a 300B amp. Let me go back to this same website that I bought the KT88 amp from and buy this same. Sorry, the amps all have different names too. That's the funny thing, but they're all made in the same factory. They're all using not the same, literally the same output transformers, but the output transformers will be wound with the same wire on the same magnetic core on the same winding machines, because they're made in the same factory.
Yeah,
They
same
just wind
parts.
them with different specifications so they can use them in different amps and call them different products. And you'll notice that a lot of them will be brand names you've never heard of. Did you ever consider why that might be? Well, it's probably because they're not real brands. They just make up these brand names as they go, so that if their product accumulates any negative reviews, any bulk of negative reviews over
Company's
time,
gone.
no problem. That company doesn't exist anymore. It's a new company, new amplifier.
Yeah, roll out a new one.
Despite being the same circuit, using the same tubes and the same parts from the same factory, it's a new amplifier. And it gives all of our contacts in the Western marketing um, pyramid that we've created an excuse to talk about a new product.
Yeah, they can definitely send me one of those.
They can definitely send you one of those in exchange for your unbiased opinion.
Yeah, my unbiased opinion. It's gonna be a great amp. I'll just give it right now. All right, I love this amp. It sounds really musical, and you can you can get it on Amazon. And you know what? If you're concerned about repair, you know what? They just opened a repair shop in the U.S. and you can send it there for breaks because they will. And
Mm.
just don't
No,
touch it.
well, it's super reliable. You've left it on for 24/7 for all 48 hours that you had it. Super reliable, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And here's my Amazon link, and here's that's the end of my review.
Make sure to like and subscribe.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen the same tube amp reviewed by like 4 or 5 people.
All within a
Only
week of each other.
that's usually the biggest red flag ever. But
Yeah.
one person did review it, and they did. I think were very honest. They said, "Yeah, I mean, it's a tube amp. They measured it, and then their channel. It's a YouTube channel. I don't think a lot of
Hmm.
people know them. I think it's called Skunkworks. I don't know if you're familiar with Skunkworks.
No, you got to show me.
Yeah, I'll show you. They mostly focus on like DIY um, stuff, like DIY tube amps, and they compared the. I don't even know what that tube amp is called, but whatever that the Amazon tube amp
Right.
to something they built, and they said, "Yeah, mine's cheaper, and safety aside, it's safer,
Hmm.
and it sounds better, and it measures better, and it has more power, and literally everything. But you got to
Hmm.
build it yourself, so that's some of the cost, but they're just not worth it. I think in that tier.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, as much as I love tubes,
It's a
I would not do one of those.
it's a promise of something, you know. I think the analogy I used, it talks the talk, but it does not walk the walk a lot of the times.
Yeah, yeah. If only it was that easy.
Let's talk about that as a pitfall, actually, since we've kind of gone on this tangent.
Okay.
Very common pitfall, trying to get into something for the wrong reasons. You know, it's like, I don't just want an amplifier, I want a tube amplifier. Like, that has to be one of the keywords in my search.
Oh yeah. Everyone I
Okay,
know is talking about this thing. I need this thing.
well, it's not even that. It's more like, okay, like I have an amp, I'm happy with it, whatever. Now I want to try a tube amp. But instead of actually going through the trouble of finding out what it means to own a tube amplifier, what are the different topologies, you know, does the output tube type actually matter that much? What differentiates a quality amplifier from a poor one? All these things. And it's, I mean, I understand there's not exactly a wealth of information on this stuff that's written in an easily digestible way for modern audiences. Let me put it that way.
Hmm.
But um, people want shortcuts. You know, they just want to buy something, and there's no better way to buy something than just go online and Google something and click buy, because it ticks the
Yeah.
boxes. It has tubes in it, fits my budget. This reviewer said it can drive my 86 dB speakers, which probably can't. Um, and that's it. But you know, why are you buying a tube amplifier? Is it just to have something that glows, just to check a box, or are you actually looking for something? Did you actually hear one and think that's the type of sound that I want? You know, and if you did, well, that's like the best thing that you can do, because now you have to think about what is it about this piece of equipment, other than the fact that it just uses tubes, that gives this sound. Um, and if you really look into it and you really think about it, you'll realize that these, you know, mass market Chinese tube amps don't have any of that. Most of the time, again, I don't want to claim to have heard all of them, but most of the time they're going to disappoint you, because the things that give quality in such amplifiers, they're not making them in China. At least not in those products.
Yeah, for me, tube amps, I feel I'm able to distinguish their tiers much more clearly. There's a very big junk tier
Yeah,
for new stuff. It's very large,
yeah,
and you'll get to like a, I don't want to say mid five, but you'll get like a competent item. You
yeah,
go, this is pretty good. Usually, I think most of those are by builders. You would have to commission one of those.
yeah. And I mean, of course, for someone first time, that's extremely daunting. You know, don't
It's
ever,
so much knowledge that you need to
yeah,
have.
don't ever make your first amp like a commission buy, because you're not gonna know what the hell to do. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
unless you get very lucky, it's unlikely that you'll be satisfied versus the money that you spend.
It's not just the sound, but it's, will it even power your speakers?
Yeah,
Did you even put enough money for the transformers?
yeah.
Yeah,
How do you allocate the budget exactly? Yeah.
it's
That's another pitfall. Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
yeah,
Tom, but
no,
that's
no,
I
no.
want to talk about that as well. Is just this obsession, or fetishing, fetishization. I don't know. I can't pronounce things, of single-ended amplifiers. Um, it's pretty misplaced for the most part. Um, a good one can sound very interesting. It can sound very rich. It can really, like this Philips amp I got. It can, you know, just have beautiful intonation and do all sorts of magic things. But so can a good push pull amp. It's really not. It's really
Hmm.
not. Single-ended amps don't have a monopoly on good sound. You know, and people kind of bend over backwards to buy these amplifiers without even considering um, the two most important things, which is what comes in front of it and what comes before it. What's your line stage look like? Does your line stage have gain? What's the output impedance of the line stage? Is it going to play with the fact that this is a two stage or a three stage single ended amp? What does that even mean to you? Do you even know what that means? What is your speakers like? Are they just small ported boxes? Are they small sealed boxes? Um, are their magnetic systems even expecting to be connected to an output transformer? For a lot of modern speakers, regardless of cost, the answer is actually no. And even worse, There are a couple companies out there. I'm not going to name any names, but a lot of people probably know who they are that make a business out of marketing their speakers as being quote unquote tube amp friendly or quote unquote single ended triode friendly. And they're not really. In reality, they just
I can
can't be. Physics doesn't allow it.
I can think of two
Um,
companies that do that.
Sorry.
I can think of two speaker companies that do
Yeah,
that.
you can think of two. Definitely a few. And when my friends, because a lot of my friends, they want to get into single-ended amps, and so they don't even think about the speakers. They just think, okay, I want like the perfect single-ended amp. The speakers are an afterthought. And then they ask me, what do you think about Company X? They say that they have such and such sensitivity numbers and such nominal impedance. I'm like, bro, it's not going to work. I'm
Like,
sorry,
there's so
they're not
much
going to have any
more than
bass. Yeah,
the impedance.
it's so much more than the sensitivity number too. It's about the entire acoustic system that the speakers reside in, because it's not just the drivers, right? They work in unison with their cabinet, and some acoustic designs work a lot better with tube amps than others, and even more specifically, some of them work a lot better with single-ended amps than others. And this is a gross generalization, kind of, but I would go as far as to say if your speakers are a ported box, unless the box is massive, like fridge sized, forget about the idea of single ended amps entirely. You need horns, or you need an open baffle, or my personal favorite, acoustic resistance, which is kind of halfway between sealed and open baffle. It's not really common. In fact, there's almost no commercial speakers that employ it anymore. But those are the acoustic systems that you have to pursue if you really want the proper performance from a single-ended amp. Otherwise, don't kill yourself. Don't bend over backwards trying to make it work, because most likely you're going to end up unsatisfied. And I see countless people, in enthusiast forums and everything, just
Hmm.
um, talking about, what are good speakers for single-ended amps, and the answer is always the same two or three companies, and they're not really good, or if they are, they're super expensive. You basically have to DIY, really, is what it mostly comes down to. And understandably, a lot of people don't want to do that. So um, push pull amps can sound great, and in fact, they do certain things better than single-ended amps. Like in general, again, generalizing, but they tend to have more drive, more rhythm, more bottom end. Um, they also can have better presence sometimes. I've heard plenty of really boring sounding single-ended amps. Um, so it really is not going to give you any sort of happiness to pursue certain technical solutions. You have to know what you're doing, and what you're getting yourself into. And of course, experiences will give you that. But even before you buy something, because resources are not infinite, you need to consider the entire system, and that includes the speakers, and that includes your preamp if you have one.
I think that's good. All right, and that brings us to the final segment, our music choices of the week. Sina, what is your music choice of the week?
Okay, this is something outside of my usual wheelhouse. This is the album's called "Look Up Sharp" by Carla Dal Forno. She's an Italian artist. This came out in 2019. This is kind of like minimalist synth wave, ethereal wave, ambient. I don't really know what you call it, because again, it's not my usual thing. But this is a very interesting album. Really easy to leave on in the background and listen to. Um, it looks like it's about 40 minutes long, but whenever I listen to it, it feels like 20. It just kind of flies by. But it's really interesting. Um, Check it out if it sounds interesting to you.
Nice. Okay, my music choice of the week is Idols. They were a band formed in 2009 in Bristol, and their latest album release. Let's see, what is it called? Crawler. I think it's called Crawler.
Yep.
Yeah, Crawler. Wow, absolutely love this album. I liked their previous album too, Ultramono. That one was pretty freaking great. But this new release, incredible. The drums just blow me away all the time. Might hear it later today. I'm gonna go with Crawler by Idols. Just
Yeah, the drummer really carries that band,
he's
in my opinion.
he's so good. But so I wanted to describe them a bit. They're rock, maybe a little punk, post punk, maybe. I don't really know, but it just it's this one was done, I think, almost full analog. So if you're not a fan of VSTs or sequence instrumentation, I think this is a good album for you.
Out of the box is what they call it, Tom.
Out of the box.
That's the recording industry term.
Oh, this is an
The
out of
box
the box. Oh, it's not done.
production.
Okay, okay.
Well, yeah, right now is a really interesting time if you're a rock music fan because we have a bunch of bands from the UK that have like been together for a little over a decade, and all of them are kind of like just hit their stride at once. There's
Yes.
Idols. There's the band I mentioned last week, Fontaines DC. There's Wolf Alice,
Mhm.
and a bunch of others that I can't think of off the top of my head. But for whatever reason, 2020 and 2021, the rock music scene in the UK just saw like a big comeback. So it's an exciting time to be a rock music fan.
Not just rock, I think the jazz too.
The jazz too, but you know more about that than me.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe another time. Yeah, your
Yeah,
Yusuf Daves, there's so many. Just pick your favorite instrument. There's an incredible artist in the jazz scene.
yeah.
All right. I think that settles it.
I think that was our best one yet.
All right. Thank you everyone for listening to episode 4 of the Good Sound Club podcast. You're going to say goodbye?
Bye, guys.